with us today is Ted Suihkonen from who's director of player development with in the Swiss league EVZ Zug. Uh,
Yes.
I'm not really good at my Swiss, but welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm grateful to be here and look forward to this chat.
This episode is brought to you by Scandlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products for the U.S. market. You can find us at scandlux.com.
Yeah. So you actually got introduced to me, and I've actually followed you on social media for a while, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are listening are you're pretty known in that community and with different coaches sites, and not just for content from a visual standpoint, but what I've really appreciated has been kind of the thought pattern and the why we're doing what we're doing kind of stuff. It's just not cool edge work.
No,
It's a lot more on the mindset and kind of the systems and tying that in. So we'll talk a little bit about that. First of all, who is Ted Suihkonen? And like before we hit record here, I asked him the origin of your name, since this is a Swedish junior hockey podcast by a Swede about Swedes for the North American market. So take it from there, Ted.
it's fun. I'm just a Minnesota boy at heart and everything else. I grew up there. My background is, last name is Suikhonen, so it's got the Finnish roots where my dad's from. My mom is from Greece. And the funny part about this whole Swedish podcast is that my wife is Swedish. So that's where our off-season home is. And it's basically where we actually call home, is back in Sweden.
Where in Sweden do you?
Gothenburg.
In Gothenburg, okay.
Yeah, the good side of Sweden.
Well, I'm from Leksand, so we joke all the time. All the people from Stockholm and Gothenburg, they come up to God's country up in Dalarna around midsummer, and when they want to relax and turn the RPMs a little bit down and see the beautiful scenery up there.
It's the one thing. I've been to Leksand a number of times, actually. I've been up there for, I think it was 3 summers in a row doing the Leksand hockey camp for Leksand, the hockey club there. And I love it. It's like it's a very mix of northern Minnesota where I grew up at. Very calm, lots of lakes, lots of trees.
Yeah.
And I always said that my youngest boy is 9, that if you ever go to hockey gymnasium, that would be the place I would send him, because it feels like a very family oriented area, and the concentrations on sport and activities there.
And it's funny how that if you find the video there, Leksand put out a kind of an info on Nubben Andersson, who started that whole hockey school, and it's amazing how I went through there as a kid. Pretty much everybody that plays hockey, for me it was just a cool thing you do during the summer, and then you had all these other kids that are coming in and you get mixed with, and it's awesome. And for us, we had Nubben, Fisken Olsson as a PE teacher, and all these guys that were just kind of, we practiced as a 10-year-old, and the A team was right behind us, and we were
in that community that you like, right?
Yeah, it's when you don't know how special it is, and that's the thing that I think people in general in Sweden, they don't know how good it is until you leave. So
I think the best part about being American and being up there, the thing I loved the most was that you actually had the baseball. And I remember when we went there, we had our daughter, I enrolled her into the baseball camp during the same time the hockey camp was. And the cool thing that a lot of people don't know, and I bring it up here because we have a baseball team in Zug, was that Major League Baseball actually helps the club out up there.
I didn't know that. I know that it's the Leksand Lumberjacks, and then the neighbor town, Rättvik, has, I don't know what the name of that is, but the two of them are neck and neck every year. And it's been going on for 40 years, and
But Major League Baseball has an outreach program that covers out to Europe and out into Asia and everything, that they have representatives come over there and teach the coaches and stuff. And the one reason why I really love Leksand, and one of the things that, you tie it back to hockey always, is like multiple sports.
yeah.
So even though in Sweden, I think your biggest, or I don't know if it's your biggest or second biggest after hockey, would be like football and innebandy.
Yeah.
For us back in the States, it's always baseball, right? So you
Yep.
have that hand-eye coordination, and for me, it was just magical to be there and see all that and talk to the people and how they actually run everything.
Yeah, and it's funny when you can, over there where they have the hockey school, where you can walk. So you walk outside, all the soccer fields are there. They actually just added, we were home in the summer, and they just added a new gym.
Oh, really?
Which is right in next to the rink and between the school and the rink. And I didn't have the opportunity to go in, but it's just so it's for volleyball and floorball and all the indoor sports, and it was kind of small in the old part. And then they of course added a paddle arena right next to the rink there too, and a new gym. And it's amazing how the facilities have improved and grown, and it's really, they can compete in a small little town of 10,000 people with Gothenburg and Stockholm. Stockholm doesn't have an SHL team anymore, and now
I know.
Now you got a bunch of American, I think Carter Camper and Matt Cato, and can't remember who else. Quenneville is there this year too, so they're starting to get these, and their family. They have families, so they realize, man, this is a great place to be. But so
I think this podcast is a little bit about pumping the tires for Leksand here.
Well, look, if you listen to the previous 15 episodes, there is a little bit of bias here, and I'm sorry, but my son, who plays in Falun, who's playing against Leksand this year in J18. Right. That's going to be a really, really difficult time. I'm going to have mixed emotions when I watch that. But
you got the Falun jersey on with the Leksand T-shirt underneath.
I don't think he does, because he hasn't been over there enough to be able to. Certainly been over there, but I'm playing men's league over here, and I'm wearing a Fallen jersey sometimes, and with lots of advertisement on it. So, but why don't we start before we get too deep? I'd like to, you grew up in Minnesota, and then you ended up in Sweden. Since this is, we could take this in so many different areas. I kind of sent just a few things, but I thought would be good to talk about. But as always, since this podcast is not yet sponsored by Elite Prospects, they should. Right. But I always go to Elite Prospects, and so you have two flags on your profile, Swedish and American. But you grew up in the U.S., so I'm sure you're a national citizen of the U.S. But are you a Swedish citizen as well now?
Yes, I am. I have been a Swedish citizen since I believe it was 2014.
Okay.
And no, I grew up in the States, like I mentioned, up in northern Minnesota. Played my high school hockey there, which in Minnesota is the biggest thing that we have.
Yep.
Played in the state tournament there. We won it in 95, which, million people watching. You got 20,000 people in the seats there, so it's amazing. And then just went on to the US.
Before we go there, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you have the big hair? And did you dye it yellow?
I didn't dye it. No, my mom wouldn't let me dye it, but I had the long hair, of course.
The flow?
This is back in the 90s. I had the flow until about a few years ago, until my hair started turning white, actually.
Sorry.
And then my kids started calling me the bald eagle.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, that's it. We'll chop that hair to keep it look like I'm young still.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. For those in Sweden, they probably don't know too much about, but go in and watch the different YouTube clips of high school hockey Minnesota hair. Google that or put it in the search engine for YouTube, and you'll see some pretty cool.
They've taken it to a new level nowadays.
I
They
know.
have. But no, it was always like that. That was a thing for us growing up. That was our big thing. That was our first stepping stone, was make it to the state tournament.
Yep.
We did, we won it to 95. And then in 96, we lost in the semifinals in the longest game ever, 7 overtimes to Apple Valley.
Wow.
It's still the longest game in U.S. history, I believe, at this moment. They just made a documentary about the game last year, so it's pretty cool. You can check that out. And then,
so Duluth High School, pretty prominent in Minnesota, Duluth area, right?
Duluth East, yes.
Yeah. And then, how'd you end up in Lincoln Stars in the USHL?
No, I was getting looked at by colleges for while I was in high school, but my stature, my height, and stuff was a little bit small. Still is small, and everybody was like, we like you, we like what we see, but you need a year's seasoning. So I went to the USHL to play for the Lincoln Stars. I was drafted by them. They were an expansion team that coming season, and had a wonderful coaching staff, and Steve Johnson and Chad Johnson. And they put us together. It was a ragtag bunch, to be honest. When we got there, the rink wasn't even done in Lincoln. It wasn't. It was. They used it for the state fair and was a horse stable, basically. So when we got there, all the players, we actually had to help build the stadium. That was like our work, our jobs. So we were putting the seats in, cleaning it up, doing all kinds of stuff. And nothing was expected of us that year. We were, getting compared to the Omaha Lancers, who was our neighbor there. We were being compared to them. Like, they went 0-60 their first year in the USHL way back when. So it was amazing because we had a couple guys that were transferring D1 schools. So they had to play a year of juniors with us, Derek Reynolds and Ryan Benkirik. And they really took us by the horns. Like, they really guided us as seniors on that team, leadership-wise. And we went on to set expansion record. I think we only lost 13 games that season. We took second place overall. And then we missed the Anderson Cup by a couple points to Des Moines. And then we ended up winning the Clark Cup, the USHL championship that year. Swept the Green Bay Gamblers, which, I mean, it's like, I started to get a little bit of chills now when you just.
I was gonna say, nobody can take that away from you ever.
No, we got a nice ring to have that, have that still, and it was an amazing time. It was an amazing group of players, and we're all still in contact because of that year was just special.
Were you so did you do your extra year in high school in Minnesota?
I graduated high school. So this, like, back in the 90s, like, it wasn't known, like, especially for Minnesota kids, you weren't going to juniors earlier. Nobody did.
So what age were you when you went to juniors? Were you 18?
18.
Okay, and then you played 1 year of juniors, and then so you could have played 2 more years of juniors over there.
Yeah, I could have, but it was I played one about a month and a half into the season. I signed my letter of intent to go to University of Nebraska, University of Alaska, Anchorage, the Seawolves, who played D1 at WCHA at that time.
Yep.
And the reason why I chose it was because Dean Talafis, who was our coach, had a very good recruiting spiel to us. And all my friends that were from Minnesota that were playing juniors at the time were going up. So we had 12 freshmen that went up that year, the year after. So, yeah, we went there and didn't go as great as it was supposed to. And
you were on a roll and you're thinking, man, it's just going to keep on. This is just the way it is.
Yeah, how do you're going from high school champ to junior champ, and you're like, okay, now we're going to go in there and roll this going, and then just the bottom fell out. But I stayed there for 2.5 years before I coach and I clashed. I was young, I was dumb, and I was like, it's over. I'm going to test my way into the pros. So I went over to Europe.
Yeah. So
much to the dismay of my parents.
I'm sure, but life, like I told someone in a previous podcast, and it's kind of how it was for me. Life's like the game of Plinko, where you have all these. Some people, if you want to be fancy, you kind of have your linear approach, and then you have life. Reality is more
Right.
variable, and everybody has a linear path in their mind. And I'm sure that was where you were, high school to juniors to college, and you're going to do this, then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do this, and then the next is Stanley Cup champions.
That was the goal, right? But then
Yep.
in the mid '90s, like the landscape of what was being played in the NHL and all that wasn't exactly fit for myself.
Yeah.
So kind of like in juniors, I was speaking with the New York Islanders a little bit through the drafts and stuff like that, but ultimately never got drafted. And when I decided at Christmas time, I was like, okay, I've had friends that played over in Europe. They're like, it's big rink, it's decent money, blah blah blah. So I was like, okay, was I 20 years old? And I was like, I'm done. And I got on the airplane. I went to Amsterdam and told my parents right before I left, and that was a very hard conversation, to be honest.
Wow.
And they were not happy about that. But I went to Amsterdam, and we went there and played for the final 4 months of the season. We won the championship. And after that, it was just kind of like a free fall. Like, just, I figured, you know what, I'm good at the game. I am what I am, pretty much. And let's go experience Europe for free and get paid a little bit. And I mean, I can't argue with it. I was in Italy, I was in Amsterdam, I was in Germany, I was in Sweden, and ultimately just fell in love with the European way of life and how everything was. And yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah. So, and I saw first year in Sweden, fall shipping. So I sent you the episode with Ian Gately. So who was playing there in the last 3 seasons. Now they really tighten up the immigration requirements in Sweden. Is really creating some problems for foreign, especially U.S. players, where they have to have a proper immigration status. They can't just go over there and come on over under a visitor's visa and then sign. Now you actually have to, before you can get a transfer approved, you have to have a proper immigration. So fall shipping, I've been to that rink, the Blue Riders.
I started that season off in Kristianstad, actually.
Okay.
And yeah, that was a piece of work, to be honest. It was my first time in Sweden, and end up in Kristianstad. I missed the train off there because it doesn't spell it the same way you pronounce it. So I remember being in Malmö, or actually in Copenhagen, get on the train, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take a ticket to the Kristianstad. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I get on the train. I ended up in Karlskrona, which was the end of the line. And I asked the bus lady, I was like, or the train lady, I was like, where's this place? And she goes, oh, I'm sorry, that's like 3 stops back. So you got to get, and I had all my hockey bag and sticks. I'm like, well, Kristianstad. She goes, sorry, it's Kristianstad. I'm like,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. Man, you even have the accent now, so it's good.
And the same thing happened in Falköping. I missed that train because everything, it's like Falköping, or I'm like, where am I going? No, I was in Kristianstad, and we were there for like the first month. It was me and a couple other imports. We were there, and we were doing well, and then money time came, and things didn't get taken care of.
Yeah, and everybody comes over thinking, man, I'm gonna make really good money, and then they realize that it's not necessarily the case. You may get free housing and some meals and
but even we had job. Yeah, but even we had, like, I was paid as a full-timer. Like, I had a pretty decent salary, but then end of August and payments didn't come through.
Oh man, that sucks.
And then my agent was like, all right, because technically they broke the contract and everything else. And then obviously you need some money to survive. They said, we go up to fellowship and then we'll take care of the other stuff on the back end. I just wanted to play. It didn't matter. So we went out to fellowship and we played that season for Bjorn Erlund. and it was amazing year. Great group of guys. A few guys from HEVDA came, and we moved the team up a division that year. And then, you know, I was never like the highest leagues. It wasn't the SHL. It wasn't the Allsvenska. But I always tell players, like, sometimes, you know, you're not going to make it there. But the experiences of just being able to, you know, see the different cultures and immerse yourself in that to make new friends for life, it's, you can't put money on that, actually.
Yeah. And it must have been a little bit special. I guess that's the standard thing. You meet a girl, and then you end up staying, and now you're a Swede.
Yeah, I'm a Swede. And that's the funny thing, because like I do have 2 passports, like you mentioned earlier, but I identify as a Swede anywhere I'm at, because the Americans, when it's kind of like, yeah, really? I'm like, no, I'm a Swede. It was the same thing when we did, I was in Russia for the last 5 years in the KHL coaching.
Yeah.
And when we went to go do our visas and everything else in Gothenburg, they're like, oh, if you do your American passport, you got this and this and this. I'm like, no, I'll do my Swedish. Yeah, but you have these different kind of like benefits. I'm like, let me put it this way. If things go bad, I don't want to be an American when I'm there.
Yeah, that's right.
And then my last year there, things went bad trying to get out.
You're happy to be a Swede then, I'm sure. So
very happy.
So let's transition a little bit. You go into coaching, so you play a few years, living life, and at some point you realize, what am I going to do the rest of my life, right?
Well, that was the thing. So I had my last year was in HC Lokomotiv, and we moved the team up that year as well, up to the next division with Christer Dreiberg as our coach. But the year before that in Germany, I hurt my knee pretty bad, and I rehabbed that pretty good. I came back because Dreiberg was my coach in Kristianstad the 2 years before that, and he contacted me after my German season. I was like, we want you to come back. I want you to play for me. So I went back to Sweden, and he put together a great team. The organization was good, and we moved the team up. But the last month there, going into playoff to go up, I just wrecked my knee again. I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm not going to do it. Even though I was only 25, 26 at that time, I was like, I want to be able to do something later in my life. And I'm not making, life-changing money as it is.
No.
So I went back to the States and went back to finish my degree. And a good friend of mine, he worked for USA Hockey, and he was my trainer off ice when I was up in Alaska, actually, during the off seasons. Steve McSwain took me under his wing and told me to be his assistant coach for under 18 midgets, AAA. So I did that for a season as an assistant coach, and then the year after, I took over as the head coach for 3 years. I was doing head coaching for under 18s, and I coached the high school team in Diamond High School up in Alaska. And we won 3 championships for the high school championships as a high school championships there. And then the team was actually nationally ranked for our under 18s. And then,
so how was that in as a making that transition into not being a player, but actually now being a coach?
Very tough. And it wasn't tough on the side of, I was young in that sense. I was young, but I had a good mentor in Steve. The hard part for me was like, it's that competitiveness, because you see something that's going on the ice and you want to be able to change it, but then you understand you can't do anything about it. So it was almost feeling like you're handcuffed. So it was a whole emotional kind of like thing. Was more the difficult part about transitioning from playing to coaching was the emotion part.
So I pulled a quote in here that I wanted to put in here, but it says, quote, adaptation to training takes stimuli. You can't force adaptation to happen faster than the athlete's current level of trainability and physical ability, which I thought was, and I think I reposted it on Twitter or something, but I thought it was pretty profound. Where does that come from? Or is that something that you
just through the years, right? So, I mean, I went into coaching, and then, you're starting to see, like, we had all the power skating and all that stuff. And then I got into more like developing like reading about stuff about like how do people actually learn, right? It's more like on the teacher side of stuff. So I had to change my mindset to think differently. Then I went to neuroscience. So I got my neuroscience degree because I wanted to know how the brain worked. And when you look at the landscape today, you see kids that are able to do amazing things on their edges or with the pucks. And I can't do that stuff. But then again, it's like, but does it transfer to the game? And when you're looking at like the training and the stimuli, like you just read, it's all about everybody wants something today. So when I look at it, it's like, okay, but it's a process. It's a long-term development. That's what we're always looking at. If I get it today, if I don't get it today, sorry, I may get it in 5 days. I may get it in 1 month later. I'm trying to plant that seed into the players. And at the same time, when you're planting that seed, you got to variable that training environment that you have so it matches where they're actually at maturely, physically, everything, mentally. And if you try to rush that process, all you're going to get is a frustrated hockey player. And we don't need that.
So what's your thoughts on we used to talk about it when I was coaching, and I coached at the youth level here locally. And the biggest thing was the difference in players' ability to commit, at the U14, U16, U18 level. And I'm sure you saw that when you came back as a coach, where you have some people that they may have talent, but they're just not bought in. They may not be committed. And some of it could be, man, they're a lacrosse player and they're really committed to lacrosse. Or they may not have the family dynamics where the family's committed. And lots and lots of different reasons for not being committed. But, whether you call it buy-in or what different ways of, when I say commitment, what comes into your mind when you hear that?
I think you nailed it, though. It's the social dynamic part about it. All it takes about is where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Right. So if I take a North American kid or if I take a European kid versus a Russian or Eastern Bloc kid, I can tell you firsthand, 5 years in Russia, you see kids that are committed at 10 years old, but their motivation is a little bit different than what ours would be. So their motivation is like their parents are committed to, making sure they're at the rink, making sure they have the equipment, making sure everything's good. They're making sure that they're outside doing extra stuff. But that's where I call it the social part, because the social part about that is that in Russia, if you make it into the KHL or you make it beyond the KHL, even to the KHL, you're making good money.
Yeah.
It's life-changing money for a Russian. You go get an education in school, you're good to make about $500 a month, $600 a month. That's the average. So the dynamics are completely different. Now you're looking at Europeans, like we always do this comparison, is like we're in a pretty good area to live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, if I make it in sport, yeah, sure, I make some good money. I might get some of that little bit of fame in it. But if I don't, I'm still going to have a good life. And it's, in North America, we have the same thing, but I believe in North America, it's more of the dream to play in the NHL. It's not so much the money that's going to be, it's like the pride to put on the NHL jersey and say you've been there.
Yeah.
And that's why you see like
brand,
a lot of the North Americans.
Yeah. That brand is so strong. I mean, the brand of, and it goes back the history, I would argue that if you ask the 16-year-old Swedish player, the majority of them are going to say, what's your goal? They're going to say to play in the NHL. They don't say, I want to win the Swedish SHL title. It's not about winning an Olympic gold. It's about playing in the NHL.
No, the brand is so big, but I also believe there's a different desire for a North American to be on that NHL roster, to be on that bench. I don't know what it is, because 2006, we had a USA Hockey coaching convention. Scotty Bowman was talking, and he was obviously at that time coaching the Red Wings, and he had he for all those years he had the Russian five, he had the Swedes, Lidstrom, and everybody there. And they asked him like if he could pick his roster, what would he confront it, or what would he make it out of? And he goes, it'd be 20 North Americans. And the reason why is because a North American player is just honored to be there and will give you everything they have, even if they get 1 second or 20 minutes on the ice. Whereas a European player is not happy unless they're having 18 to 20 minutes on ice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like a different mind thought there, as well. Like the mindset's a little bit different.
So let's go back to this issue about the different levels of trainability and physical ability. So was that frustrating too, where, and if you mix in then the person's or the player's commitment or buy-in, did you see a lot of that when you came back first few years of coaching, where you could see this person's got the physical ability, or they should have the trainability, but they're just not there?
You know what? When I first came from playing to coaching, I'll be 100% transparent with you. I was ignorant to it. I didn't know. Like, it was.
Wow, that's great.
You just play and you just coach. Sorry, you just coach and you let the players play, and it was kind of like, okay, we're trying to win. We're trying to win. It wasn't until I matured, I came back to Europe, and then we started working in the clubs, and where it really dawned on me, it was more like, all right, what's really important here? Because the North American way, right? So when we have our juniors, we're not connected to anybody. It's not like Lexon where you can be from under 6 all the way to the pro.
Yep.
We have tryouts all the time for under 18s, under 16s, as you've noticed.
Yep.
So the one thing that you don't have in North America is you don't have that commitment to the club anymore. Because if that team doesn't want me, fine, I'll go to the next team. If my friends are going there, I'm going there. It's like it's just jumping. So that's why I was kind of like very ignorant to it all. I was like, okay, let's win at all costs. Let's have a successful season at these times. But when I got to Europe is when you start to understand, like, you have the grassroots levels within the club to go all the way to the pro. And that's where it really kind of like started sinking into me and started going back to everything. Is like, it's not about the hockey. It's actually about connecting with the person.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter if the kid was 12 years old. It didn't matter if the guy was a pro. You have to be able to connect on a personal level with that person. Because if I want to elicit something from them, they got to understand that I'm coming from a place of care, that I really, really want them to succeed, instead of me using them as a pawn, for example, in my game. You know what I mean? So for me, it was like the first and foremost was trying to get in touch with who they are and, what drives them. Because once you know what drives them, then you actually know what buttons to push them forward.
It's definitely a relationship game. And
100%, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Now is more prevalent than before.
So the next bullet point I put on here, and it's a little bit of I'm going to combine two of them. What's your thoughts on winning and losing, and what do you think about eighth place trophies?
Winning and losing at what level is probably going to be your best question there. And
and let's frame it in this. Let's put it in this framework of Swedish juniors at the World Junior team level in the junior worlds. They've struggled in the last, really, since Zibanejad won it, right. When he scored the game winner. So that's probably been 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had 10 years now of being really, really good, winning the group rounds. They go into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and they have a hard time with the edge of winning, right? They win until they are beat, right? And I say that's, well, of course you win until you don't win, but I'm saying they have a hard time making that next leap. And when you're looking at US and Canada, US struggle a little bit this one, but let's say Canada, who, and it goes back a little bit to the culture of winning at all cost versus developing long-term systems and bench depth and so on. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let's look at your neighbor. If you even want to look at that, Finland.
Yeah.
I mean, I read your bullet points, and there's also a thing called competition in there, right? And if I want to like very simplify this, under 18, under 20 pro, that's your win. That's like your win area, right?
Yeah.
But that under 18 and under 20 is still that win development area as well, because they're still young. So you got to have a healthy mix there. When you get to the pros, it's like, hey, that's everybody's jobs on the line. Coaches,
Correct.
GMs, it's the whole organization's on the line. And that's what brings the ticket sales. That's what brings the sponsors. That's what, let's say it feeds the clubs, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be at that win at all costs when you're at the pro level. When you're at the under 20, under 18 level, like the hockey gymnasiums in Sweden and everything else, yeah, you have a winning thing there as well. But you got to have a healthy mix of development in there, because you're at a time of age where these kids are trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not just in the hockey world. That's just on the outside world. It's even more complicated, right? You got to take the time. Like I said before, you got to take the time to understand and know what personal problems are going on with them and everything else, but make them also understand, like within the game, once they get that arena, it's their mindset has to change. Like everything's off, off the limits now. We got to go on hockey, but you got to figure out how you're going to blend that development piece into the winning piece. But then, as I mentioned earlier, there's that 3-part system. We get down to the youth levels, you got competition. Competition should be, it's a natural human behavior. And we like to take competition out of the equation, where you told me about 8th place trophies. Hey, you win, you lose. You get a ribbon, you don't get a ribbon. That's how it is. It's like we make everybody feel happy nowadays, and it's like, okay, well, competition doesn't mean much anymore. But you take a couple 3-year-olds out on the playground, and they're going to compete for the toy that they want to use. They're going to compete for the ball they want to throw. They're naturally going to compete. So I think the competition, you can't take it out, and you have to have that in at the younger levels. And I think Sweden does a good job of it with their hockey schools and everything else. Like, they have the small area games. You're always competing against each other and all that. And USA Hockey's really adopted that over the last few years, and we've seen what it's actually created for USA Hockey. There's that competition part, but then there's also got to be the inner competition, right? I got to hold every 10-year-old to some kind of level, some kind of compete level, whether it's competing with the next person or competing with yourself. Are you going to get better today than you were yesterday?
Yeah.
Are you just going to take the day off? It's like, how do you hold everybody accountable? Because I think that's where the cream rises to the top, right? Like the ones that have that instilled in them at a young, they don't get that taken away, or they don't get it like watered down. They continue to rise. And given the numbers we have in America, Canada, and Russia, it's, you can pick all those.
Yeah.
But I think the fair comparison for Swedes would be Sweden and Finland.
Yeah.
Because population size roughly the same. But the Finns, they have nothing to go against the Swedes, but they have that little bit of a chip on their shoulder all the time.
The Finnish lion.
The Sisu, right?
It's real. It's real. Well, let me so let's go let's wrap it up a little bit. So I've asked this question, but I always think of this in my own life. If I met myself when I was 17, right? So you talking about the kind of the pivotal time between youth hockey and adults, and early years and juniors, and the kid is just in gymnasium in Sweden. And sometimes we become experts after the fact, and now you're a few years past 17.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Thanks. Yeah.
Still 17 at heart, I'm sure, but you meet yourself, your younger self today, and you have the ability to see he's now one of your players, but it's you. And you what are the things that you wish you could tell yourself when you were 17 if Ted was sitting in front of you right now? That may have been because of the experience you've had since then that you just didn't know back then, you know?
Yeah. Like for myself, work ethic was never the problem. I woke up, I shot pucks. So, like my work ethic, telling my younger self and seeing my younger self, there was nothing I would change there. That was there. I think the one thing I would say to myself would be study the game more. So, and the reason why I say that is because now, even when we play for fun, just like with the old guys and stuff like that, it's not so much like you see all these skill videos, and it's like these kids can do everything, like I said, and they go 100 miles an hour to nowhere.
Yeah.
And they look great in practice. They look good in camps. And you're like, why? What's happening here? And they don't understand the game, I don't believe, as much as they used to be able to.
So in your new role, and so you're now in a player development role, which is you're both
same role I've had. Yeah, same role I've had when I was in Russia.
Okay.
So it's the same role, but just different clubs now.
So you're in a skills development role. Are you also in an evaluation role?
Yes.
So how quickly can you see whether the player, you can see the talent, you can see the ability, but the hockey IQ?
One game.
And
couple shifts.
Is that so okay, now you see that, is that something that you can help that player with? And how do you put that into the plan?
Well, that was like my biggest, teaching hockey IQ. Everybody says it can't be taught, right?
Yep.
So then why do we coach? If it can't be taught, why are we coaching? That's my biggest thing. It's like, if a kid can't do math, then why does he have a teacher? Well, he can learn math, right? So that was like my biggest project over the last 5 years in Russia, was like trying to dive more into that side of stuff. And that's why, if I was to go back 17 years and tell myself, I was pretty smart on the ice, but I could have been smarter. And when you can start to evaluate, like, what were the decisions I had? What am I doing before I get to the puck? What routes am I taking? Am I slowing down? Am I changing pace? All these things take into account, like, what our next action is going to be on the ice. So when we were in Russia, you don't like to toot your own horn, but just from Lokomotiv itself, we took 18 guys, we got them drafted in the NHL in 5 years. And a bunch of these guys were never really thought of. Some of these guys never played on national teams. And so what we do is, or what I do especially, is more about, you take a drill and you take a skill, or you take whatever it is, that player's game. You want to take their habits. You want to work on them. You want to work on their strengths. You want to get them better. Then you want to actually get them to understand when they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, all the different intricacies that are inside of there. And the only way you do that is, one, watching video over and over and over again, seeing these things happen. You're like, okay, you're always doing this. This is what you want to do. This is where you're trying to get to. And then they start to understand, okay, yeah, that's where I'm going, but why is it not working? Okay, so now what are we doing before the puck? What are we doing after the puck? And then what we do is, then we put it out onto the ice. So you're going to work on a technical aspect of it in isolation, just so they can feel. But then you have to immerse them inside of maybe like a passive area, where they're going to have to feel like a different movement from a defender, or you got pressure coming from some way. Maybe you're going to have to stimulate the nervous system by adding 2 pucks, so they're having to do multiple things at once, so that their vision gets a little bit more open and everything else. And then you put them in full competition. And what you're wanting to see is that, if I do something today on a Sunday and we have a game on Tuesday, I want them to see them, use it. And that's where we hold the players accountable towards. Because you ask the player what he wants to work on, he's going to tell you, I need a better shot.
Yeah.
I got to get faster. Yeah, but where you got to get faster at? Full speed? I need my edges better. But where? Like edge control is edge control. We're on two edges all the time. It doesn't matter, right? You're always on your inside, you're on your outside. So edge control is just it's a hype word that's out there today. The more key point is where do I need that control at? Why do I need that control? And then once I know I have that control, how am I going to use it in the right way? So that's where, it's more of like when we do our stuff with our players, like they have video that they have to evaluate. They have to have sit downs with us. We go out onto the ice. They have a say in what they're going to be doing on the ice, but it's not just, going. It's when you get to understand about how the brain works and how a human learns, you have to have, the heart rate at a certain level.
Yeah.
If it's too high, now what you learn doesn't get filtered. So it's always making sure we take those pauses inside of practice, making sure we let that heart rate settle down while you watch a video so that stuff can start to sink in and cement in, and then you go right back at it. So it's it's not just doing stuff to do stuff. There's a scientific background behind it.
Wow. It's great. It's really quality over quantity.
Always.
And then if you get the quality, then you can add the quantity for sure.
But that's where you get where like we talked about before, and just to sum it up, you talked about, the competition, development, and winning. I think it goes in that order. You have competition, you're going to have development. You have development, you're going to have the wins.
And I think if we look at like the US model with NTDP, where you can now fund, we've talked a little bit about this before, but it'd be great to be able to have an NTDP insider to kind of talk about it. But it's really concentrating. You've got the talented individuals. You're selecting these through in all the way up into I think it's U15, and then you're pulling them out, pretty good sized group. But then you're also concentrating the methods and the right coaches and the ability to do something with a group itself and follow them, not just for one season, but for multiple. And the results that they've created are, not just 1 year or 2 years, but now, you look at the draft and how many people are coming out of NTDP is amazing.
It's the same as if I go to Sweden and I say back in the 90s, what you had up in Modo, Övik.
Or you look
at the same.
You look at Frölunda or now, I think if you look at Rögle, that is kind of developing that, and of course, Leksand is up there too. But I think it's a mixture of systems, environment, talent, but I really do believe that the importance of the coaching and the commitment and the systems and also the understanding and capability of good coaches is so huge.
I think that's where we lack as we go further along. The coaching education. It's the part that I think it lacks the most, and the hard part is that whenever you look at a club and they're going to hire somebody, where are they hiring them at? The pro, super elite, under 18 elite, the hockey gymnasiums. Okay, that's great. But what are we doing from under 15 down? And if you look at the majority, it doesn't matter if it's in the States, it doesn't matter if it's in Europe. The majority of coaches are volunteers.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you listen to, if you go back to episode 11, I believe it's with Urban Umark, who was coaching, brought in when Naslund was in Modo, and they had the resources to spend at the junior level. And then they dropped down with SHL team, couldn't spend the resources, and they went down to one coach. And, we're going to have him on again because it was so interesting in really looking at when you have those resources in, you have a GM, you have a skills, you have the trainers, you have, multiple people versus one person and a volunteer that they're doing the best thing they can after they've been at work all day kind of thing, right?
Exactly. And then you also have to look at it too, is where a lot of teams will do that. And then somebody will slip in that 1 year.
Yeah.
And then they'll just say, nope, it doesn't work.
We need to change.
Exactly. And then when you're looking at development, it's like, okay, if we're going to do this change, it's the same thing that USA Hockey did. USA Hockey, it took years.
Yeah.
You have to look at a 5 to 10 year. And if you want to take any better example of it, look at what Belgium soccer did.
Yeah.
They revamped their whole model when they lost, I think, the European Cup or the World Cup. And they said, nope, that's it.
Yeah.
And then they went back to the grassroots and they said it's going to take time. And they stuck by themselves and it worked.
Yeah.
So,
well, we could talk for hours here. What's the best way, put a little plug on your social media, of course, at Suihkonen 77.
yeah.
What's the best way for people to reach out to you and follow you? What's the best way for them to follow you?
I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram at Suihkonen 77. I don't what do you call it? Put out a lot, don't have any side businesses or anything else like that. It's just, I'm out there just trying to spark engagement and get people to look at a different way of looking at stuff.
I think that's the ticket, though. I think that's what makes you a little bit different and special is there is no ulterior motive. There is no monetization motive. Yes, the content is really, it keeps up from a coolness standpoint with the best of them out there. But I think that the differentiation is really in the reasons behind it and the why. And I encourage everybody to go out there, look at some of the videos, look at the
text matters the most, I think.
Yeah, but
the captions.
Yeah, and also, but look at the words behind it of what the intent we're trying to do. And I think that's, if we can help as a community to kind of spread that, it becomes more about the content rather than how cool it is. And, certainly it's cool to have parachutes out on the ice, but, you can also run stairs, and gain.
When we're paying $300 an hour for ice, I don't think I want to be using parachutes out there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, yeah. That's kind of where I'm from too. So Ted, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for jumping on, and good luck this year in a new place and a new environment. And I'm sure our paths will cross again.
I hope they do. And I appreciate you having me on. It was enjoyable.